Welcome to The Explainer. So, what happens when a government agency, the one in charge of protecting the environment, rewrites the science on its own website? Today, we're digging into the pretty controversial changes made to the EPA's climate change page and what it tells us about where science and politics collide.
All right, to really get a handle on this, here's what we're going to do. First, we'll look at exactly what happened to the website. Then we'll do a little before and after to see what got cut, and we'll hear the EPA's official reason. After that, we'll dive into the pretty strong reactions from scientists. And finally, we're going to zoom out and ask, was this a one-off thing? And most importantly, why does one little webpage change matter so much?
Okay, so let's start with the event that really kicked this whole thing off. And look, we're not just talking about a few words being tweaked here and there. This was a major shift in how a key government agency was talking to all of us about science. So here's the bottom line. A government website, the kind of place students, teachers, really anyone, would go to get the facts on climate science. It was just suddenly, and very, very differently, rewritten. This wasn't a simple update. It was a total overhaul of the page that explains what's causing our climate to change in the first place. So what exactly got the axe? Well, this is where it gets really interesting. When you put the old version of the site right next to the new one, the changes, well, they aren't exactly subtle. They're fundamental. The page did a complete 180. It went from saying very clearly that human activity is the main reason for modern warming to focusing only on natural things. Stuff like the sun's output and volcanoes. And I mean, just look at the old language. It was totally direct. This quote right here from the archived site reflects what pretty much all scientists agree on. Unequivocal. It doesn't leave much room for doubt, does it? But the new text? It completely sidesteps any mention of what humans are doing now. It talks all about historical, natural causes of climate change, and then sort of just leaves this giant, obvious hole where the human factor used to be. So how in the world does the EPA explain a change this big? Well, they didn't really try to hide their reasoning. Actually, their statement was incredibly blunt. So the EPA's official position was that this wasn't just an edit, it was a course correction. A spokesperson literally said the agency would no longer take marching orders from the climate cult, and they framed the established scientific view as a left-wing political agenda. Well, you can probably guess what happened next. That statement and the changes to the website set off a firestorm in the scientific community. And what's really important here is that the criticism wasn't just from one side. It also came from former officials who served under Republican presidents. Now, to really get why they reacted so strongly, you have to see this number. Scientists have found that humans have likely caused more than 100% of the warming since 1950. And you might be thinking, how is that even possible? Well, it's because natural factors during that time, like volcanoes, should have actually caused a tiny bit of cooling. So you have experts like Daniel Swain coming out and saying, look, this new website is just plain misleading. They're basically arguing that it completely ignores decades of research and presents a view that the actual evidence just doesn't support. And then you have criticism coming from past leadership. Christy Todd Whitman, who, remember, ran the EPA for a Republican president, called the whole thing a huge step backward on the world stage. She's basically saying it makes the U.S. lose credibility. And maybe this quote sums it up best. A former EPA climate advisor, Jeremy Simons, used this really powerful analogy. He said, it's like pretending cigarettes don't cause lung cancer. It really drives home just how concerned the scientific community was about ignoring such a well-known cause and effect link. So that brings us to a really important question. Was this website change just a one-time thing, or does it fit into a bigger picture? Well, the evidence seems to suggest it wasn't exactly an isolated incident. Yeah, the sources point to a bunch of related moves. For instance, the huge National Climate Assessment Report was taken off government websites. A major project looking at climate risks was put on hold. And there was a lot of talk that the EPA was getting ready to repeal something called the endangerment finding, which is the whole legal reason the agency can even regulate greenhouse gases in the first place. Okay, so why are we spending all this time on one single webpage? Because really, this isn't just about a website. It's about something way bigger, the relationship between our government, science, and our trust in both. This whole thing brings up some pretty huge questions, right? Is an agency's job to just push the policy goals of whoever's in charge, even if it means changing the science? Or is its job to give the public the straight facts, no matter what the politics are? That's really the heart of the debate. So in the end, this one little website change makes us ask a much bigger question. When science and politics smash into each other, who are you supposed to trust to tell you what's actually going on?
And what happens if that trust gets broken? That's something to think about.